Hi there, this is DM Nell, and it's been a couple weeks since my last recording. I've had a couple of sessions since then, and so this recording may be a little bit longer than my previous ones have been. But unfortunately, life has gotten in the way, and I haven't had as much free time as I would have liked. So such is the way of the gamer. But anyway, at any rate, I have a couple of sessions to cover, so let's just jump right into it. I believe with the last video that I did, it summarized what happened in session 2 of the Curious Case of the Errant Swine, which is the second novice level adventure in the Tales of the Demon Lord campaign. And the at the end of that session, the heroes had I believe, stopped at a circular room that had this circular room here that had a golden bowl floating in the center of it, and it also had three glowing red shards that were laying on the floor. Now, what you're seeing on the screen here isn't what was on the screen at the time, since this is the aftermath of the adventure. But I'm trying to recreate as much as I can anyway for visual purposes. So when they encountered this room, they immediately thought it was a bit suspicious because the entire room was mirrored. There were three shards that were on the ground in this floating golden bowl. So Matthias, the Jotun, and the dwarf magician Gruntbelly enters the chamber. And just as an aside, the player who runs Gruntbelly was out this week, so I ended up running Gruntbelly for him. And one thing I wanted to do was to try to push the adventure along because this was already the third session, and I really wanted to kind of wrap it up. So I was trying to use the fact that Gruntbelly was being controlled by me to kind of spur things along a bit. So he was a little bit more aggressive than the player normally plays him. So the other heroes or the other players were thinking that's because the dwarf was maybe possessed or had been controlled by somebody, but he was being controlled by me, but it wasn't because the dwarf was being controlled by an external in-game source. So anyway, they enter this chamber and they immediately start messing with the chaos shards on the ground. Matthias goes to the one that was in the side of the room over here, and he bats it with his axe, which causes it to hit the wall and bounce on the floor. And so he comes to the back of the room and tries to do the same thing with the second one, just to see if anything bad would happen, which is why he's doing this. And when he hits the second one is actually an illusion, and his axe goes through it. The illusion disappears, and that triggered a trap, which causes the golden bowl in the center of the room to explode in a bright flash of light. Now, in the adventure itself, it was just a bright flash of light that was to blind the characters if they failed on I think it's a strength challenge roll, but I wanted it to be a little bit more of a harmful trap. So I had it also I wanted it to also include a dangerous component. So I had a flash of heat accompanying the flash of light. So the trap goes off. These two are burnt, but they're not blinded because they both made their strength challenge roll. And so they were a little bit more reticent about messing with the chaos shards. So they decide to withdraw. They come back in the hallway here, and they decided to rest for the night because they'd taken some damage up to this point. They were really not feeling like they could progress any further without healing up some. And so they decided to rest for the night here. So I really didn't want them to rest. I really wanted just to move on. And anytime you incorporate a rest session into an RPG, it just slows things down. So I tried to push this along, but at least I wanted them to see that resting in this place was not the safest idea. So in the middle of the night, I had a demon appear, and this is a demon from elsewhere in the complex, and the demon is a tiny demon, and I had it just appear and start, fucking with the heroes, and so they were fighting the demon, and they managed to kill it and finish the rest. And so they went back into the room here. Grunt Belly determined that the other two were, or the last remaining shard that was laying on the ground was also an illusory trap. So he goes and picks up the one that was not. And he leaves the room. When he does, the golden ball in the center of the room basically turns into a lead ball and falls to the ground. So that room was pretty much emptied out. And so they decide to move on, and they progress down the corridor here to the next section of the this part of the dungeon, or the elf shrine. And I'm actually on the I am on the player view of Roll20 because I wanted you all to see how the dynamic lighting works in action. So the just a little bit hard to move everybody here because of the walls kind of blocks progress due to the dynamic lighting. So we have they move through here and they come to the door here, and they enter this next room, which is a room that they had already been in. And at this point, they had a choice to make, which was to go through the door on the left, which was closed at the time, or the door at the bottom, which was closed at the time. So they decided to go progress through the door at the bottom. And when they do so, they see that the door leads to a hallway, and the hallway is blocked by an elven statue. Now, the statue is now reduced to rubble because that's what happened during the fight, but it was the statue of an elven maiden, and it was a tall statue. It was about as tall as the Jotun. And so when the characters approached it with the intent to go past it, the elven statue, as you can imagine, came to life. Didn't come to life. It animated, and so the players were being blocked by it. It was holding a threatening stance, but it wasn't attacking. Then the Jotun, the player of the Jotun, decides, okay, this is an elf. Elves don't like trolls. There's this big whole backstory about how the Fae in this world had fought the race of trolls in this bloody, nasty war a long time ago. So he decides he's going to speak Trollish, because that's the other language he is familiar with. So he's going to speak Trollish to the statue. So the the statue is supposed to be non-intelligent, but I thought it would be fun if the statue would react negatively to the presence of trolls, or to what it would be programmed to recognize as troll speech. And so I had it attack them. And so the fight commenced, and they fought for a while. It was a pretty tough fight because the statue was a difficult opponent. And in fact, I believe it's a difficulty of 50, perhaps. Well, I'm not really sure. That's in the DM view, so let me check my book here. But anyway, it was a pretty tough fight. And so as a result of that, one of the combatants fell during the combat. Now, it wasn't any of the player characters. It was the female Delia that they had found back in Farmer Ham's in his barn, and that Kane was familiar with. So she was accompanying them at this point, and up to this point, and so she was helping in the battle, but she wasn't as careful as the others, and so she ended up getting killed. Or actually, at this point, she had been reduced to, or her damage had met her health total, so she fell. And in this game, Shadow of the Demon Lord, you have to make fate rolls. So in a fate roll, there's two levels of dying. There's the state of incapacitation, and then when you're doing your fate rolls, you have to roll a d6 at the end of each round, and if you roll a 6, then you gain a health point back, and you wake up, and or you don't gain a health point back. Excuse me. You lose a damage point, and you wake up, and you're able to move around again. But if you roll a 1, then you progress to the second stage of dying, which is dying, and at that point you have to continue your fate rolls, rolling a d6 each round. If you roll a 6, you get better. If you roll a 1 again, you're dead. So Delia basically died in 2 rounds because she rolled a 1 on her initial fate roll, and then she rolled a 1 again on her second fate roll. So she died pretty quickly. The rest of the heroes continued their fight and eventually destroyed the statue. Cain had caught a glimpse into the next room here and saw all these eyeballs lining the room. And they decided they were not ready to mess with that. So they came back up and entered the central chamber again. And they decided that they were going to go into this side chamber over here. So they entered it, and they were again cautious because 2 statues were in here. So they took their time making sure that the statues weren't going to animate and attack them. So the Jotun did not talk to them in Trollish this time. Or maybe he did, but they didn't react because these were not magical statues. But they did notice that the wall at the far end of the room had been torn down. And so there was some caverns beyond. The Jotun and one other character, I can't remember who, had stepped through the hole and found that there were troglodytes inside. And there you go. And so they decided they're going to back up into the room and wait for the troglodytes to follow them so that they can have fight on their turf. But at this point, the session ended, and there was a lot of time wasted in this session. I think, well, not wasted, but it was not a very progressive session. So that's really about all that they had accomplished. And so we ended the session here. And when we started the session up again the following week, which was last week, I told the players that they were where they left off last time, and that the 3 troglodytes were up here in the exterior of the room, and they weren't entering. They were just kind of looking through to see if the heroes were going to come back out. So they kind of go back into their cave, and the heroes decide we're going to just back up into this room again and close the door, which is what they did. But when they did that, they happened to notice that floating above this dome, it was the image of an elven maiden. And this is the miniature that I had used for that, or the token, I should say. And something I pulled off of the internet. So anyway, and so this image appears, and it's looking at the heroes almost curiously, not with anger, or not with fear, or not with any type of threatening gaze, but just kind of wondering what they're doing. And so they notice her, and they start talking to her, and she addresses them in the common tongue because that's how they're addressing her. And she states, she asks why they're here, or maybe I think they ask why she's here, and she said, she turned it around. She said, I was wondering the same thing. What are you doing in my shrine? And so they then ask her, well, your shrine, if this is your shrine, then, it's full of nasty things. And she said, yes, she noticed that. And she said, since you're here, maybe you can do me a favor. And she offers them the opportunity to clean out her shrine, particularly the bloody bones that are still infesting the shrine, and also the demons that are infesting the shrine. And so the heroes say, well, what's in it for us? And she said, well, I will grant you a favor, and you can keep anything you find in the shrine. I just want it cleaned out. They are, defiling the sanctity of my shrine. And so they're like, okay, well, we can deal with that. What are your favors? She says she will bestow it upon them upon completion of the task. And so she said she'll return in 50 years, and they said, whoa, 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 whoa. We'll probably be finished a lot sooner than that, so how do we get a hold of you? And she said, oh, just tap your sword against this dome, and that will alert me that you have finished your task. And so she disappears. The heroes decide, okay, this is a good opportunity to get some elven loving, some fey loving, and so they decide to take on the bloody bones first. So let me pause there for a second and just address something that is different in how I handled this situation than how it is portrayed in the adventure. In the adventure, the image of the elven maiden does appear, but it is not something that's interactive. Basically, in the adventure, it says after a minute after the characters enter this area, the image of an elf woman dressed in a flowing gown manifests in the light above the bubble. She appears anguished, clawing at her face to tear her skin, rip out her eyes, and showing them to the characters before fading away. And this is supposed to be kind of a horrific scene. I really didn't see the point of that. And I thought it would be more interesting to actually have an elven maiden appear and interact with them. So that's what I had happen. And also, I forgot to mention this as well. They asked her who she is, and she said that she is the Lady Aurora. And one of the heroes, I believe one of the dwarves, did an intellect challenge roll and discovered that Lady Aurora is legendary for being one of the daughters of the Fey Queen Titania. So that is another piece of information that they gathered from this encounter. So anyway, the reason why I decided to put Lady Aurora in here was because I really wanted to start getting some of the lore of the world built into this campaign and start to have the PCs interacting with some of the NPCs in this campaign. And I thought it would be a better way for them to get to know how the Fae interact if they interacted with one. So I had Lady Aurora appear, and I had her offer them this service for a favor. Now, the favor is something that comes out of the Terrible Beauty book. And I've been itching to use some of this. And there's actually page 36, there's the Favors of the Great Fae table, which whenever the Fae decide to give a favor away, there's a table you can roll on to determine what favor is granted. So I was really wanting to use some of the stuff out of this book. I decided this would be a great opportunity to do that. So that's one of the reasons why I brought Titania or Lady Aurora into this adventure and depart from what is actually written in the actual adventure. Another reason was because at this point the PCs were starting, or the players were starting to talk about leaving the shrine. And if they did that, they really hadn't accomplished much here. They came here looking for Delia's friends. They didn't find them. They really didn't explore much of or the whole complex, which would have if they would have explored another room or two, they would have found some more information that will help progress the campaign along. But they were talking about leaving already and just starting something different. So I didn't want them to leave the shrine without at least getting those campaign hooks that I had planted. And so this was a good way to keep them here and give them a good reason for staying. So that is why I added the Elven Maiden encounter. So having said that, let's get back to what they did next. So next they decided they were going to take on the Bloody Bones, and so they start progressing up the hallway, back up the hallway. And one thing that they learned from the encounter with Lady Aurora was that the flooded passage that they had initially come through was no longer flooded. And so they were not really sure why. So they came up here and then to inspect it, and they found that it indeed was no longer flooded. And then at this point, they had gotten to this juncture, and there were two bloody bones waiting in ambush on either side of this hallway. And then there was also two down here in the lower section. And this section is about 4 yards down, so that would be about 12 feet down from this level. And this door was partially ajar. Off to the right. So the heroes start fighting the bloody bones, and another thing I want to interject at this point is that the players during the session last week, they were rolling abysmally. Their dice rolls were terrible. They couldn't hit hardly anything, and when they did hit something, their damage rolls were terrible. And so they were having everything that they encountered, they were having an extremely difficult time hitting and damaging. So these two bloody bones, they should have been maybe 2 or 3 rounds worth of combat. I think it lasted 5 or 6 rounds, and they finally killed these two. And then the two that were down here at the bottom, I decided I'm just going to have them, run off and wait in ambush, because if I fight them now, these guys are going to die. Plus, the ones down here saw that they killed these two up here, so they're not necessarily going to jump up here and have the same thing happen to them. So I figured it would make more sense if they ran off and prepared an ambush for later on. And so the heroes, after this fight, they decided, man, we need to rest again. So it hadn't even been, a couple hours since they rested last time, but they were hurting pretty badly. So they withdraw, and they go back into this room in here, and they barricade themselves in this room so that they can get a full day's 24 hours worth of rest, and so that they can get more of their health or more of their damage reduced. So they barricaded themselves in this room. They rested for an extended period of time, and then when they were done, they were ready to go. So at this point, I was like, well, they've been in here for 24 hours. These bloody bones are going to be like tired of waiting for them to come out, and they're going to start looking for them. And during the 24 hours, they determined that they were, behind this door. Excuse me. And so I basically surmised at this point the bloody bones would be waiting in ambush right outside the door. So that's pretty much what happened. The Jotun was leading, and the two bloody bones are right outside the door here. So the Jotun was pretty much blocking the door, causing the other players behind them to be at to be hampered by the fact that he was blocking the targets. So if they wanted to target something beyond him, the targets beyond him would have partial cover. So that made the challenge of this encounter even more difficult. Besides the fact that they continued to roll terribly, and I was rolling amazingly well during this adventure. I don't know how many times I rolled a natural 20. It was just amazing. It's a good thing we don't use any type of critical hits or critical damage rolls or damage effects or critical miss effects, I should say, because that would have wiped the heroes out with all the 20s I was rolling. But anyway, so the Jotun was fighting these two guys, and the dwarves were back here trying to fight, and the archer Kane was trying to shoot arrows through, and they were having, again, just a terrible time trying to hit these two bloody bones. The bloody bones were hitting the Jotun, whittling him down, And so the dwarves decide they're going to put their uh, they're just going to charge in and try to help the Jotun out. So they both move through here, and they start fighting the Bloody Bones, and they're still just rolling terribly. The fights are dragging on and on. And so we're running out of time in the session. I really wanted to finish it this night, so I decide they still have the demons to deal with, in the lower part of the dungeon. So at this point, I'm like, okay, so I'm bringing some of the demons up here. So I bring 3 of the demons. There's 4 left because there's actually 5 in the adventure, but one of them attacked them while they were resting during the week before this. And so there were 4 left remaining in the shrine. So I decided 3 of them are going to come up here and start fighting the Bloody Bones, because I figured the demons, they're just an engine of destruction, and they've been dealing with the Bloody Bones ever since they were appeared in this shrine, however that happened. And so I figured that the demons would probably want to kill them first. And so I had the 3 demons fighting the Bloody Bones as the PCs were fighting the Bloody Bones. And so that helped the PCs out. And then once the PCs managed to kill the Bloody Bones with the demons' help, the demons turned on the PCs. Now at this point, the PCs were again pretty damaged, and there wasn't a whole lot much more that they could take. So with 3 demons in here, even though there were tiny demons and they were not very doing very much damage, they could still probably hit the heroes more often than the heroes would be hitting them, because again, the players were rolling terribly. So I decided instead of fighting the heroes, the demons are going to start messing with them. So I had them doing just disgusting things like urinating on them, trying to defecate on them, and stuff like that. For a couple of reasons. Number one, I was going to impose some conditions on them if they failed their strength challenge rolls, being hit by urine, demonic urine, or being hit, being touched by demonic feces. If they failed their strength challenge rolls, but surprisingly, they started rolling well for the strength challenge rolls, so they made those. But it was still a bit of comedy relief after a very frustrating session because the heroes were rolling so poorly. In fact, it got so bad that they stopped using the macros that were built into the character sheets, and they started just rolling the formula for dice rolling, which is more time consuming. But that's how distrustful they were of the dice rolling macros in inherent in Roll20. So they anyway, they were not having a good time. So it was good to have a little bit of comedy relief. They managed to kill the 3 demons without much difficulty eventually, and so they decide to press on, and they move on down into the lower part of the dungeon, and they get to the room that has the eyeballs. Now, the eyeballs, as it's written in the adventure, they're supposed to attack. But what I figured what would be more interesting is if instead of attacking, they would let the heroes through. And then if they came back out, that's when they would attack, unless they came out with a particular item that's in the next chamber. So I let the heroes just kind of be creeped out by the weird moving eyeballs, and let them enter the next chamber, which is a chamber full of statues. They were all misshapen humanoids. And there were 3 more chaos shards on the large elven statue that appeared very much like Lady Aurora. And she was holding a platter, and the 3 chaos shards are sitting on there, and there was also a ring. And so the heroes are suspicious because, based on the previous part of the adventure where it was a trap with the Chaos Shards, they decide, okay, Kane, let's have you shoot the platter with an arrow just to see what happens and see if there's another trap. So Kane shoots it. He rolls a natural 20, so he maxes out on his attack roll. So I basically described it as he not only upends the platter and the Chaos Shards go flying off, but he also bullseyes the ring that's upended by the platter moving up, and it sticks into the statue's chest. So it was pretty. It was an excellent roll. They determined that the Chaos Shards are real and the place isn't trapped. So they collect the Chaos Shards. They collect the ring, and and they were also attacked by the final demon that was down here, and it didn't last long. It messed with them some more, but it really didn't hurt them too badly. And so they collect the 3 Chaos Shards in the ring, and they decide to leave the chamber. And as they do, all the misshapen statues become unmisshapen, I guess. They resume their normal form. So either the Chaos Shards or the ring cause the statues to warp and become disfigured. And when that influence was removed from the room, the statues resumed their shape. Or at least that's what I tried to describe. I don't know if the players took it that way, but that's what I had meant to suggest by that happening. All right, so they leave the room, and the item that I wanted them to leave the room with so that the eyeballs would not attack them is the ring. Now, the ring itself is a relic, and I thought it was time to introduce a relic into the adventure. Relics are something, they're kind of like comparable to artifacts in D&D, although I don't think they're as powerful as artifacts in D&D are. But it is meant to be a very rare thing. During the course of a campaign, there should not be more than 2 or 3 relics that are introduced. And so this is the first one I wanted to introduce at this stage, and the relic that I chose is Circe's ring. So somehow the Fae maiden named Circe lost her ring, the ring found its way into the shrine of Lady Aurora, and so the players end up finding that. And it says here that it's a band of white gold set with a bright green emerald, which retains the magic vested in it by its first owner and maker, a nymph of vast and terrible power. Circe despised mortals and would use her magic to twist their minds and make them her slaves. The ring bestows similar powers on its wearer, even as it feeds on the wearer's life force. And that's the cool thing about relics in this game, is that it has a good effect, and it also has a negative effect. So it's not something that you necessarily want to keep for any extended period of time. So I figured that the ring was what twisted the statues, even though it corrupts the minds of people. I figured it on inanimate objects, an extended exposure to the ring would cause them to warp. Just as it would normally warp the minds of living creatures. So that's what happened, and when the ring left, the statues went back to normal. So anyway, that explains that. So the heroes decide they're going to leave, and at this point they had finished cleaning out the adventure, or the shrine, and so of the things that Lady Circe had, that Lady Aurora had asked them to clean out. So, and we had run out of time for the session. So at this point I said, okay, session's over. We will work on this some more via email during the course of the week. And so we ended the session, and I think I forgot to mention one other piece of information, and that was that when Delia died, they inspected her body basically and found that on the back of her neck was a Demon Lord tattoo. And the Demon Lord tattoo they had already encountered before, and so they knew there was some significance to it, and it was not a good thing. So they suspected that she was, here not for good purposes. Oh, they didn't finish yet. I forgot one last part of the adventure. So they when they finished down there, they started moving up to the last room that they had not yet explored, and that was the room where the bloody bones came from. And so they come back up here, they come down into this door that's already open, and they go inside. There's one bloody bones in there. They manage to dispatch it. Or did no, I'm sorry. There's no bloody bones in there because they killed the two during the ambush earlier in the day. So what was in here was this was the Bloody Bones lair, and what was left in here after the last one of them were killed is the pile of meat that they were feeding on and their latest victim, which was a person leaning up against the wall, which I'll show you here in a moment in player's view. There we go. And this person was still alive. And the way I described it was this person was laying up against the wall, and she kind of looks up with, her lidless eyes and her lipless mouth, and she was begging them, basically saying it was, she was so cold and it hurts. And what they had determined was this was the real Delia, which it wasn't really the real Delia. This is just one of Delia's people, but that's what I had originally had decided. But for some reason they decided it was Delia, so I'll let them think that. And so the Jotun decides to put her out of her misery, and so he kills her. That's where we ended the session, and then at this point we decided to do the rest via email. Now, during the email exchange that we have during the week, I advised them that they were now going to be leveling up to the next tier, which is the expert tier, and that I would be, telling them what they find as they explore the rest of the shrine. So I gave out the loot, which I included in the loot was some enchanted items. And I also wanted to include some incantations that were evil in nature. So what I intend to find out here is if these players want to experiment with some of the more evil aspects of the game. So there were 2 forbidden incantations: a destruction incantation, a death incantation, and a curse incantation found. And then I also wanted them to find a note. Now, this is the campaign seed that I was talking about before. And the note was in a backpack, and it was addressed to Delia, and it said, a place has been made for you in the Fey Site expedition that we have arranged with Narish's people. We require a Fey relic. See to it that you find one at any cost. The Brotherhood requires such an object for the next phase of the summoning. Do not fail us, Sister Delia. The Demon Lord does not tolerate incompetence, and neither do we. So what they get out of this one note is several bits of information. The first thing is that Delia joined this expedition that was put together by somebody named Narish. Now, Narish is somebody that Matthias has been looking for since the start of the adventure. That was part of his backstory. So I wanted to bring that in and tie that into the campaign. So he now has his first solid clue on the whereabouts of Narish, or at least Narish's activities in this area. So Narish apparently hired these people for this Fayside expedition, and this Brotherhood, quote unquote, had planted one of their people, Sister Delia, into this expedition to acquire a Fey relic that they need for some type of summoning, which they are on the quote-unquote next phase. So they determine that there is an organization known as the Brotherhood that's doing some sort of summoning that is progressing in phases, and that they are needing certain things in order to progress the summoning. So there was a lot of information in this one note, and hopefully they will pick up on these things as they progress during the campaign. But at the very least, it's going to prompt the character or the player that runs the Jotun to try to figure out what the connection was between Delia and this Narish person so he can track him down. Because the Jotun is looking for a relic that was stolen from his people. And so all he knows is that this person, Narish, was responsible for the raid that had resulted in that relic being stolen. So now he has a reason to continue adventuring in this area. So, let's see what else I want to talk about. I gave him the information about the Chaos Shards and the other items that they had found. And I gave out the favors because they had summoned the Lady Aurora back, and she had held up her end of the bargain and decided to give them the favors. Now, the favors were something I could have rolled randomly off the table. In fact, I think I did, but I didn't like the results I was getting. It didn't really fit the people that she was giving them out to, and I figured that the Fae are going to be a little bit more interested in giving out favors that fit the person that they're giving them to, and not just randomly throw out favors. Or at least Lady Aurora would be that way. Maybe other Fae would be more fickle and just say, "Oh, you get this favor. It didn't fit you, but deal with it." But Lady Aurora is a little bit more, a little less fickle, I should say, and she would be a little bit more interested in giving them something that they could actually use. So the favors that she gave out were favors that were appropriate for each of the characters based on what she knew of them, which isn't much, but she's a smart lady, so she kind of figured out that the Jotun would the Jotun, the giant folk are they value strength, so she gave the Jotun the favor of might, which increases strength score by 1 point. And then for the human who uses a bow and arrow, she gave him the the favor of good fortune, which is good luck, and gives him a boon for attack rolls and challenge rolls. And then for the two dwarves, now normally elves and dwarves don't get along, so I made it a point to say that she didn't have a problem with dwarves, even though some of her people do. And so she said that she was granting the magician more magical knowledge, so she granted him an actual Fey spell over and above the normal allotment that he gets for being a magician. So I picked the spell. Picked the spell Fade because it had to be a rank 1 or a rank 0 spell. And so I decided Fade would be the one I would grant because it sounded the coolest of the options. And then for the priest, I decided to grant a bit of protection from death because these guys are really, really trying very hard to die in this campaign. So I figured I'd give them at least one of them a free life. So this one is a favor of extra life, which is when they die, they are immediately restored to life with damage equal to their health minus 1. So this gives them 1 point back, basically, and able to, they come back to life and they have one point remaining before they are incapacitated again. So the players seem to enjoy the favors that they received. The enchanted items, I'm not really sure what to do with yet, and a couple of them I kept secret. Normally, I will let them spend time and figure out what the items will do. But 2 of them, I didn't want them to figure out that easily. I wanted them to actually assign them to somebody, and then they could figure out what the items do. And those 2 items are the jar, which is actually a jar that contains some fey creatures that will, basically be helpers for secret helpers for the one who owns them. So they will, basically repair their items, stitch their clothes, shine their shoes, things like that. But they're not going to do anything until somebody actually claims the jar. And then the second item is the ring. And I figure that the ring isn't going to reveal anything until somebody puts it on. And so that's what I'm waiting to see who has the cojones to actually do that. All right, so I think that is it for the last 2 sessions. And so I'm really, at this point, I'm really interested to see what they're going to want to do next. The next leg of the campaign is an adventure that is called the Temple of Shadows, but it's actually another dungeon crawl, and I'm not really ready to do another dungeon crawl, so there's a couple ways that this could go. They could decide to hunt down some beastmen in the Sentinel Woods, because the beastmen destroyed the village of Hamlet, which they're going to walk through and see that they destroyed it. And so they may decide to go back and deal with the beastmen. Or if they don't decide to do that and they decide to come back to town, then I'm going to have some time go by and I'm going to have them do their own thing for a bit. And then somewhere down the road, we'll start the Temple of Shadows, 3 or 4 months after the events of this session, to let them experience the passage of time, and also to have the Brotherhood of Shadows deal with the fact that they hadn't acquired the Fey relic that they needed, so they had to actually, find some other relic to take its place, and that requires time. So, anyways, I'll start it a few months down the road, and then I will start the adventure in the rich part of town, which is called Coins, I think. I believe so. And there's actually two parts to this adventure. There's a very short city portion of it where the players actually have to go through the town, that part of town, to get to the source of what's causing the problems in the town. And then the second part of the adventure is the dungeon crawl. So I'm going to spend at least the first part of this adventure having the players, going through town, fighting the creatures that they encounter in the town, and having it be more of an urban crawl. And then once they get to the house that they're looking for, I'll have them, finish it out. And I'll probably shorten the dungeon crawl because I don't want that lasting, another 3 or 4 sessions. I really want them just to get to the meat of it quickly, determine what's going on, and deal with the threat there, and then we can move on to the next adventure. Like I said before, I want this to be a fast-paced. I want this played the way that the game was meant to be played, which is, one adventure per session, which equates to me, since my sessions are short, one adventure for every 2 sessions. So I really want to get this adventure done in 2 sessions. So that's my plan. I'm kind of skeptical if we'll be able to pull it off, because I know my players and I know they like to dawdle, especially when I have clear direction. I kind of have to lead them by the nose sometimes to get them going. But I'm hopeful that they have enough information now to actually get them, interested in picking up some of the hooks that I'm throwing, clues that I'm throwing out at them. All right, so that is pretty much it for this video. I hope that this series is useful for anybody that is planning on running this campaign. Probably not, because I'm really diverging from the source material a lot, but maybe it'll give you some ideas in case you don't want to run it as written either. But at any rate, I hope that this is, if nothing else, informative and maybe a little bit entertaining. So at any rate, I'll come back hopefully next week after we have our next session and give you a rundown of where the campaign goes from here. So this is DM Nell, and I will catch you on the other side of that session.